Most Americans are so goddamn stupid, they don't even realize how tyrannical the country is. We have something shockingly in common with dictatorships. There's only 2 other countries in the entire world that have a system like this. What possibly are these other 2 countries that have similar laws? And you're probably thinking like, oh, it must be like really new, modern countries. It must be like cutting edge pinnacle places just like the US. An African dictatorship. And the second one, the one that everyone says is terrible and no one should live there and it's just a huge dictatorship and that people aren't free and they're censored. That country. That's the one of 3 in the world that share that with the US. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Kyle Mao. We are posting a video every day in October, and the big day is Fridays. We are posting the Wrocław Life in Poland series with an exclusive look on the ground, so make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you check out those videos every Friday. They are really cool stuff. In this video, I'm going to talk about how most Americans, and I don't mean like you watching this video, it's probably not you, but if you go to like your average American in probably like Heartland, the Rust Belt, the middle of the country, most of them don't realize that we have something shockingly in common with dictatorships. So there are 3 countries in the world that tax you by your citizenships. I'm about to reveal what those are, but let me explain. That basically means that me, as an American citizen who has lived abroad for nearly a decade, every year I still have to file tax returns in the States. I still have to pay taxes. It doesn't matter where I live. As long as I hold that blue passport, I'm always responsible, or it's my head basically. Now, my businesses all run from the US, so this is like fair. Obviously, if I'm running a US company, I need to file US tax returns. It makes total sense. But here's the thing. If you pack up and you move to Italy, that you still are under an obligation to file all your returns in the US and basically to prove that you don't owe tax to the United States. You still can be taxed. Now, there's typically, no double taxation with most countries. There's treaties here, treaties there. It's a long, complicated process that I'm not going to get into in this video. But the point is, you still have to file it and you may still have to pay. Whereas, let's say that you're a person living in the UK. That person in the UK can open a US LLC and get a bank account online, and they can go fuck off to some tax-free place like Paraguay or Uruguay or Dubai or Singapore, and that's it. They can effectively reduce their tax bill to 0 because those countries don't have income tax, because let's say you move to Dubai, you're not taxed on your income there. There is a company tax, and they've effectively moved their residency. So they open an LLC or a corporation in the US in a state where there's no tax. They then move to a country where there's no tax, and they effectively pay 0 tax. Just like that. By having an LLC in the States that pays 0% in the state, they then pay themselves a salary, which is basically pay themselves all the profit the company makes. So the company makes no profit, and they sit and they collect all their money and they don't pay any taxes on that. Now you might say, oh, how do they live in that other country if they don't have a passport? It's not that difficult, because those countries oftentimes make it fairly simple to get residence permits if you open a company. It's really that simple. You might say like, oh, the US is the greatest country in the world, and it has its perks in many ways. It is really good. But what possibly are these other 2 countries that have similar laws where you're taxed by your citizenship no matter where you go in the world? And you're probably thinking like, oh, it must be like really new modern countries. It must be like cutting edge pinnacle places just like the US. Those 2 countries that have similar taxation laws are an African dictatorship called Eritrea, and the second one is North fucking Korea, the country that everyone says is one of the most dangerous as far as having a lunatic with a nuclear button, the one that says he's oppressing everybody, the one with all the crazy communist statues everywhere, worshiping the family of dictators. That country, the one that everyone says is terrible and no one should live there and it's just a huge dictatorship and that people aren't free and they're censored. That country. That's the one of 3 in the world that share that with the US. 3. And one of them is North Korea. And this just boggles my mind. I've gone down the path of looking into renouncing my US citizenship, so don't think that I'm a person who is like dying to get rid of my blue passport. I really was for a few years. I've kind of mellowed out on that. Actually, the story of leaving Ukraine and having that passport, like getting out, and if shit ever really hits the fan, there's probably not a passport I would want more in the world. So that really has kind of like changed my view on that, as opposed to a few years ago, I was absolutely ready to throw my US passport in the trash. But what gets me is that a lot lot of people in a lot of countries can simply pack up and move, open a company in the US or opening a company in Paraguay, Uruguay, Dubai, wherever, and they can effectively cut their tax rate way down just by doing that, if not making it so they pay basically 0%. And what gets me is that people parrot that the US is oh so free and blah, blah, blah. And in reality, we share the same laws with this as some of the worst countries in the entire goddamn world. And I just wish people would wake up and start to understand this instead of parroting the usual stuff. Oh, the IRS agents aren't that bad. Keep in mind that when the US became a country, people rioted and threw tea in Boston Harbor over a tax that was much, much smaller. Income tax became a thing and it just never went away. When it was first invented and first created, it was like, oh, this is just gonna be, to fund the war. Guess what? Guess what the taxes do these days? They still fund the same fucking wars. So much waste with the government and spending. I mean, it's ridiculous. Anyone who thinks that the government deserves a dime of people's money is just off their rocker. I mean, it's clear that they can print as much money as they need, and there's really no reason they should just be stealing it out of the pockets of hardworking people. Of course, if you're a business owner, you have all sorts of loopholes. Write this off. Get an exception here. You can, take advantage of this tax break. Blah, 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 blah. And of course, you have to hire a team of accountants to actually do all of that. And to me, if you look at the IRS website and you look at how many freaking forms they have, that to me is like the perfect example of government waste. Instead of just making it simple and allowing people to build businesses at free or low tax rates and hire people at affordable rates to give jobs locally to people, instead they have an army of forms. I don't know how many there are, 5,000, 10,000, whatever it is. They have a library of forms to make it complex so that you have to hire an accountant to sort through it all. And that's only if you can actually find a good accountant who actually understands all of this and can actually help you save money. Instead of just making it simple from the start, they make it unnecessarily complicated from start to finish. Instead of allowing for innovation and encouraging it, they handcuff you and say, well, if you're smart enough, you can figure it out. I think it's bullshit. Most business owners would agree with me, but there's a lot of people in the United States that sit there and just think that it's this totally free country and that every country in the world is like this as far as their tax laws and reporting. And trust me, everywhere, there's a lot of countries you have to pay tax. There's pretty much very few places that are as complicated as the US is paying tax. Most of the time, it's far more simple, especially if you're an employee. I've lived abroad in a lot of countries now for a lot of years. Any normal employee has it much, much, much simpler than an employee in the US. In the US, you still got to file your return and make sure you're all good and do your personal returns and compile everything. Let's say you bought a house or you bought a car, you have this investment. It's so complicated compared to everywhere else. Now, maybe that comes at a cost. The US is certainly a very prosperous nation with a lot of investment opportunities, but I think it's a band-aid on a bullet wound. Everything as far as just the general taxation in the United States is just completely out of control. Stifling innovations, handcuffing people instead of just allowing people to innovate and develop and build good companies. So the next time that someone says the US is the land of the free and the home of the brave, show them this guy.